How's it going, everyone? I'm Motive Games, and today we're back with another leveling guide for Last Epoch. This time for Sentinel. As always, this build is designed to be played on any subclass. It does work best on Void Knight, but the gameplay footage that I'm showing you today will actually be done on a Forge Guard. So, yeah. This build is very similar to a League starter. It's meant to help you get your character to in-game and clearing monoliths with very little time investment so that you can start farming for whatever drops you want to play for other builds. If you like builds with consistent DPS and a jack of all trades kind of toolbox, then this build should be perfect for you. And now, on to the skills. We're going to be starting with Rive, which is a 3-hit combo, the final hit doing double damage from the rest. This is going to be the cornerstone of our build, and the main ability we'll be using for damage half of the time. We're going to start with 1 point into champion, 3 points into bound weapon, and 1 point into foe cleaver. The important thing about foe cleaver is that it will basically double the stats of all two-handed weapons, so that will be exclusively what we're using. Normally going to be a sword or an axe, as you'll see is required later in the build. From there, we're going to go ahead and put 2 points into outburst, 1 point into reclamation, and then 3 points into brutality. This will give us our major damage buff on the third strike, since it's multiplicative, doing a lot more than any of the other ones normally would. After that, you can put 1 point into coup de grace. This will give us a 15% life execute. This will even work on bosses, allowing you to end bosses much faster than you normally would. From there, you're going to put 2 points into flurry, 4 points into concentration, and your final point will go into focus strike. If you have anything left over, you can consider putting it into reclamation to get a little bit more leech, or points into champion. As a quick note, once you pick up focus strike, I do not recommend throwing any more critical strike chance on this build unless you're trying to get Void Cleave to crit, which we'll talk about later. Focus strike makes it so that the third hit will always crit. The third hit is doing most of your damage. So once you have this, any line that would be critical strike chance, try to put on critical strike multiplier instead, and you will see a massive damage increase. Shield Rush is the second skill that we'll spec at level 10. A big thing to know about this skill is when you first spec it, you're not going to be able to use it. If you try to use Shield Rush and your character is running in place and you get stuck, it's because you've attempted to use it without a shield. Shield Rush cannot be cast without a shield until you get at least 3 points, and those points are going to go twice into Consuming Path, and then once into Dark Rush. Dark Rush removes the shield requirement, so you can now use it without a shield, and you should be fine from there. But keep that in mind. Once you've got those 3 points out of the way, put 1 more point into Consuming Path, and then 4 points into Will Breaker. From here, honestly, I won't say it really matters where you put your skill. The big thing that we want is Dark Rush. I like to drop more damage into it, so you could put 4 points into Warrior's Entrance. If you feel like you're using too much mana because you're casting it too often, put some stuff into Rush Mastery. If you don't find you're using it as often and your mana's no problem, you can dump the rest into Splintering Impact. The whole thing about Shield Rush is just mobility. It gets you through the map quickly and nothing else really matters about it. So let's move on to the third skill. Void Cleave is our third skill that we'll be speccing at level 20, and it's going to be a lot of damage of our build. We're going to start with 1 point into Dark Pathway, 1 point into Armor Sunderer, and 5 points into Deadly Omen. Deadly Omen being 125% damage to high health enemies kind of lets you know that our whole entire goal with this skill is to one-shot packs of mobs. It'll help with your clearing speed quite a bit to pick this up early, and can just allow you to kind of do a playstyle where you shield rush through a map, find a big pack of enemies, use Void Cleave to kill them, and then just move on your way. With those points out of the way, you could go ahead and put 5 more points into the depths, giving you a larger area, 50% more damage as well, making that goal a little bit easier to achieve, and then 2 points into Dark Pathway to make sure we have it on more often. From there, 1 point into Precognition, so it can't be dodged, not a big deal, and then Crushing Echo can pick up the rest of the points to give you some flat void damage on hit. Very good ability. As a quick note as well, it requires a 2-hand sword or axe, so it kind of goes along with Rive. And same concept as before, if you don't have a 2-hand sword or axe and you try to use this ability, your character will bug out. Keep that in mind. Always make sure you have your 2-hand sword or axe equipped. Moving on from Void Cleave, our fourth skill will be Volatile Reversal. This is an ability that sends you back in time 2 seconds ago to where you were. It will change your HP and your MP as well, so keep that in mind. If you were low 2 seconds before, you'll be low again, but if you were healthy and you happen to take a huge hit, this could be a panic button to save your life. Now with this, we're going to put 1 point into Terminal Void Rift, 3 points into Dark Expanse, and 3 points into Harbinger of Dawn. This will make it so that enemies hit with Void Rift when we go back will now take 30% extra damage and can let us squeeze in a nice extra chunk once we get there. From there, we'll put 2 points into Traveler's Fatigue and 1 point to Time Lost Wisdom. This will make it so that your MP will not change when you teleport back, or at least it can't go up. Your MP could still go down, but it has a drastically reduced cooldown, letting us use it way more often. Your health regen will also be slightly decreased, but that shouldn't be a big deal. From there, 1 point to Time Sap and 3 points into Warp Time. This will give us increased attack speed after teleport, and then 1 more point into Time Sap and 3 more points into catching up. With this, we'll have increased movement speed and can reposition. And for your last 2 points, I would almost say Dark Expanse could be helpful, but there's not really too much extra to squeeze into this build. If you really want a little bit of extra survivability while it's off cooldown, 2 points into Phase Reality can be very helpful. For the last skill, personally, I don't think it really matters what you put here. If you're playing Forge Guard, you can pick up Forge Strike. If you're playing Paladin, Holy Aura would actually be amazing. But I don't want to include those type of skills because this is a build that can be used on anyone, so we've opted for Rebuke. Rebuke is a channeled spell that essentially makes it so that you take reduced damage while channeling. This will allow you to, in some cases, just completely ignore boss mechanics, tank any kind of hit that they could throw at you. There are some true one-shots in the game, such as Jura, so keep that in mind. It will not save you against them. Now, with that, put 2 points into Regenerative Shell so we can have some regen while channeling, and then 3 points into Brave the Elements. This will give us 45% elemental damage taken while channeling, and it's multiplicative, so it actually reduces the damage by a large amount. From there, pick up Protect the Legacy so that buffs persist after channeling, 1 point into Burst of Speed so we get some movement speed and attack speed afterwards, so you can get a little bit of burst after the cast, and then Solemn Vow to increase the duration of those buffs. Keep in mind that the buff duration will depend on how long you channel the spell, so if you just tap it and let it go, you're not going to get that long of a buff. With that, you can go ahead and put 1 more point into Brave the Elements, 4 points into Augmented Plating, or 5 points, I guess, whichever, and then finish it out with Regenerative Shell. The rest of the points aren't that big of a deal. If you have like 1 left over, you could throw it in Mystic Aegis, throw it in Battle Meditation. I don't think it's really a big deal because at the end of the day, this whole side of the tree is all we care about. Now, let's start on the passives. We're going to go ahead and put 5 points into Overwhelm, 10 points into Relentless, and 5 points into Armor Clad. One big thing about Armor Clad is that the damage reduction from this is multiplicative from nearby enemies, so it's going to be much more helpful than a normal damage reduction modifier would be. Then we can move straight over to Void Knight and put 5 points into Temporal Corruption. From here, I want to go ahead and put 2 points into World Eater and 3 points into Starro and Steel. I don't feel like we have to commit too much to World Eater at the moment because this amount of Leech will actually be very helpful even in the beginning. But we'll fill that out later. From there, go ahead and put 8 points into Void Blades, and then 2 more points into Sorrow and Steel. From here, 5 points into Finality, and now we can go ahead and cap out World Eater, cap out Sorrow and Steel, and then finish off Temporal Corruption. With that done, let's go over into Forge Guard, and we're gonna put 5 points into Weapons Master, 5 points into Fresh from the Forge, and then go ahead and cap out Weapons Master. With your remaining points from this point, you should be basically done with this build, but any extra points can just go ahead and be dropped into Champion of the Forge since we will be using 2-hand weapons anyways. Around this point, you should be looking to upgrade your build, but if you wanted to, you can continue putting points into Champion of the Forge and then start looking to, if you're a Void Knight, you could start filling this out with like Woe, Forge Guard, probably just picking up any kind of resistances. Things like Might would be good. Battle Hardened's always nice. Utility at this point, you probably have enough damage, so don't neglect your defenses. Now, for the inventory, we've came over here to lastepochtools.com. If you're not familiar with this tool, as I've mentioned it in the beginning of most of my videos, it is an indispensable utility for you as a Last Epoch player. You can find build planners here to let you meticulously plan out every part of your build guides to help you find what you may want to play, but my favorite part, the resource tabs. This, having all the items, all the skill trees, what rewards you can get from monoliths, dungeons, and arenas, I have found to be an indispensable tool in my journey of playing Last Epoch, and I think you would too. With that out of the way, you'll notice that a lot of this build is empty in terms of items, and that's because I really don't think it's too important what you put here. The biggest part being the weapon. Wanting to find melee void on this is, I think, very big. If you've watched my previous Primalist guide, I think a lot of the things from that stay true. You want flat damage as one of the most important modifiers, but the thing that I think is going to be slightly different is increased melee attack speed. unlike Primalist, we do not have a major attack speed steroid in this build, so getting lines such as melee, increased melee attack speed are going to help your damage quite a bit. From there, I think the best amulet is going to be Jade Amulet. Even if you can't find increased avoid damage on it, and you happen to find things like resistances, health, the bonus melee attack speed is going to be great, so keep an eye out for a very high rolled implicit Jade Amulet. You can always tell implicits because they'll be the very top 2 lines that aren't affixes that can be changed through forging. From there, I think Copper Ring would be very helpful. If you decide that you don't want to use Copper Ring, I think that Gold Ring would be really nice as well for some defensive resistances, and then if you're really trying to speed run through the story, Silver Ring's increased movement speed can be very helpful. But with those, I think looking for increased void damage and increased critical strike chance can be very helpful for this build, but again, not a big deal. The belt that I would highly recommend at the moment is Plated Belt. You can pick it up at level 19 and it has a lot of armor on it. Important modifiers on this would be increased cooldown recovery speed. It can make it so that you have Void Cleave up much faster, but also not a big deal. Health on this is going to be very big as well, so if you find a belt with health on it, make sure to snag it. For boots, funny enough, one of the best things you can find on it is bonus movement speed as an affix. You just try to find whichever boots give you the highest movement speed, because repositioning can oftentimes be a little troublesome with this build since we are using And for boots, one of the best lines you can find is actually going to be bonus movement speed as an affix. I think it kind of just tells itself you want your movement speed on your boots to get as fast as possible through the map. For the rest of this, it's not really a big deal. Put anything you want on here. Mostly resistances, you're not going to have an offhand, but finding some kind of gloves that can give you good resistances, the best armor, or on chest piece that you can find, gives you health. Those are going to be way more important than adding more damage onto this build. Your damage is really front-ended into your kit, so I think hedging the rest of your kit with defenses is going to be very important. Same thing with idols. I personally like to use my idol slots to fill out whatever resistances I'm low in, so I always pick up any kind of resistance idols that I can find. They'll normally be like 2 talls or 1 by 2 wide, and just checking to see which ones have the highest resistances on them. Anyways, I think that's going to be it for this video. There's not really any tips and tricks that I think you'll need to play this build. It's going to be very similar to the Paladin build I've showed before in terms of tips and tricks using Volatile Reversal to get a little bit of extra damage out. But for the most part, it's very much a simple build, just like the Mage one was, so I think you guys will be fine. If you enjoyed this style of video, make sure to leave a like and a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out my Twitch, where we're live, often testing new builds, or just trying to push these simple builds as far as I can get them. Peace.